The cafe had been unusually quiet that morning, the kind of silence that comes not from peace, but from fear. Every customer kept their voices low, waiters and baristas moved briskly but carefully, and even the steady hum of the espresso machine felt subdued. All because he was there. On this particular day, Richard was in one of his moods. Dressed in a sharp navy suit with a perfectly knotted tie, he sat tapping his fingers impatiently against the marble table, his eyes scanning the room for the smallest imperfection. The cafe staff exchanged nervous glances, silently urging each other to be careful. No one wanted to be the target of his wrath. When his order arrived, his usual double espresso with a dash of cinnamon, it took less than a sip before his voice boomed across the room. "This coffee is a disgrace," he barked, loud enough for the entire cafe to hear. The sound of his cup slamming onto the saucer echoed like a warning shot. Customers froze mid-bite, and the staff braced themselves for another public dressing down. The manager, a thin man with glasses who had dealt with Richard more times than he'd like to admit, rushed over with an apologetic smile and a trembling voice. But Richard wasn't satisfied with apologies. He demanded to know who made the coffee, who approved it, and why standards were so embarrassingly low. His words were laced with cruelty, cutting through the air like knives. The barista responsible, a young boy in his first month on the job, stood pale and silent behind the counter, terrified. That was when she appeared. Emily, the new waitress, had only been working there for a week. She wasn't familiar with the unspoken rule of staying invisible when Richard Carrington was in the room. Emily had seen her share of rude customers before, but something about the way Richard berated the staff, especially the young barista, stirred something in her. She had been raised by a single mother who taught her that respect wasn't a privilege earned by wealth, but a basic courtesy everyone deserved. Standing in the corner holding a tray of steaming cappuccinos, Emily took a breath and stepped forward. The cafe seemed to hold its breath as Emily approached Richard's table. The other waiters looked on in horror. No one interfered with him. It was unthinkable. But Emily didn't hesitate. She set the tray down on a nearby table and stood straight, her eyes meeting his without a trace of fear. She calmly told him that the way he was speaking to the staff was unacceptable. The room fell into stunned silence. Richard, momentarily caught off guard, stared at her in disbelief. No one, absolutely no one, spoke to him like that. Richard's expression hardened as he prepared to lash out, but Emily's voice didn't waver. She reminded him that behind every cup of coffee was a person who tried their best, that mistakes happen, and that dignity should not be a luxury reserved for the wealthy. She pointed out, not in anger but in truth, that his behavior said more about him than the coffee ever could. Every word hit with quiet force. The customers, previously shrinking in their seats, began to look at Emily with awe. Richard's face flushed, but instead of exploding, he fell silent. Something about Emily's tone, firm, respectful, and unshaken, disarmed him. For the first time in years, he was faced not with fear, but with someone who wouldn't back down and yet didn't disrespect him. The room remained tense, everyone waiting for his response. Then, in an almost imperceptible shift, Richard leaned back in his chair and asked for a fresh cup. His voice, while still sharp, lacked the venom it had just moments before. Emily nodded, thanked him for his patience, and walked back to the counter with the same composure she'd entered with. Over the following weeks, something remarkable happened. Richard returned to the cafe, as he always did, but his demeanor changed. He was still demanding, still precise, but the cruelty was gone. Sometimes he even offered small compliments on the service, something no one could remember him doing before. The staff began to relax on the mornings he came in, and the oppressive tension that had hung over the cafe slowly dissolved. And though Richard never openly apologized, everyone knew what had caused the shift. One young waitress had dared to stand up to him, and in doing so, she had changed not just his behavior, but the entire atmosphere of the cafe. Emily never sought recognition for what she had done. She simply continued her work, greeting every customer with warmth, treating her coworkers with kindness, and handling each day with quiet strength. But among the staff, she became something of a legend. Customers who had witnessed that day still spoke of it, not as a moment of conflict, but as the day someone reminded everyone, millionaire or not, that respect is a two-way street. As for Richard, though he never became the friendliest customer, he began leaving larger tips, not out of guilt, but perhaps as a subtle acknowledgement of the respect he had been shown. On rare occasions, he would even ask Emily for recommendations, and when she spoke, he listened. For a man who had spent years intimidating others into silence, that was a change no one could have predicted.